My name is Ryan Beckwith. I'm the owner of A3. I'll give you a little bit of background of me, and I won't go too far deep into it. It gets boring. And then this is Coach AJ, Anthony Orange, AJ, and I'll let him go through his background as well, just so you get a little bit of knowledge of who we are and what we've done and how we got here. I was a 3-sport athlete in high school, 2-sport athlete in college. College football and track, high school add soccer to that, so I did all 3. And then after college, I ended up being a professional in track and field. I was training for the Olympics at one point in the decathlon. So for those of you that aren't familiar with the decathlon, I always get asked if I rode bikes or whatever, and it's like, well, no, that's the triathlon. The decathlon is we're doing full-on sprinting, so the 100-meter, the 400-meter, the hurdles, the pole vault, the long jump, the high jump, and a couple of the throws. So that was kind of my path there. I've coached at the University of Georgia once I finished my eligibility there. Then I coached at UCLA in strength and conditioning, so in this stuff with speed, strength and conditioning. And been doing that my whole career. So I've been coaching for almost 20 years now and started A3 back in 2013. Met this guy probably 14 or 15. When he was playing in the CFL. He's been played professional football for 10 years. He's born and bred in Bakersfield. I'll let him give you a little background of who he is and where he came from.
Okay, yeah. Anthony Orange, call me AJ. I was born here in Bakersfield, went to West High, graduated West 2006, straight to Fresno State. Played true freshman there. I led the nation in kick return my sophomore, junior year, All-American. Ended up fortunate enough to get drafted by the Cardinals in 2010. Spent 2 years there, got traded to Minnesota. I spent 2 years there, and then I ended up in Seattle. Spent that year on Seattle's team. We ended up losing the Super Bowl, but did make it there. Wasn't on the roster, ended up tearing my ankle up pretty bad. At the end of that year, missed some workouts, ended up back in the CFL. For the last, it's been 5 years? 5 years I've been up there, 2-time All-Star there. And then pandemic happened, forced me home, and I've been working here since March.
Yeah,
about then.
Yeah, he was training to get ready, so we'll get into this whole training aspect of what off-season, preseason, in-season looks like, and that's where he was. That he was going through his off-season right into his preseason, and then pandemic happened, and the CFL was supposed to start up in May. He was supposed to report in May, and when all that started, not figuring out what was going to happen up there, he made the decision that he was going to not play this year, and luckily he made that decision because ultimately they canceled the season anyway, and he started coaching here. So it's a great find for us. It's been great for us, but that's a good segue into what we want to talk about, because there is a difference between what you're doing in the off-season, what you're doing in the preseason, and what you do in season. Now, there are a lot of similarities because a lot of it, what we want to talk about is functional movement patterns. That's a very big thing to understand. That once you start training, so for those of you that have trained for a sport in the off season, and then the season starts, and then you stop doing those things, there's about a 2-week period there, so 10 to 14 days, the body will start unremembering those aspects of the training that you did. Because ultimately what it comes down to, when you're training, when you're going through stress, now that could be your training, and that could be a competition. When you're in competition, your brain will only resort back to the way you've trained it to move. So think about that. So if I went through 3 months of an off season and trained, did all this stuff, ran, was at the park, lifted, did all those things, and then preseason started, so I have a month before my season start, and I stopped all of that stuff I was doing to get myself in shape for that, and then the season starts. Now we're talking 2 or 3 months down the line, that I haven't been doing those movement patterns that got me to be in shape for preseason. That's where we're going to start resorting back to old movement patterns. And this is where injuries start happening, because you've got to understand the way the brain works. I am going to, say I trained, and let's say I got up to a point where my squat got really good, and I started running really fast, and I was changing direction really quick, and all of those things. That's my mindset. That's where I'm capable of moving through space. Does that make sense, what I'm saying? 3 months goes by, and I haven't been training those aspects of those change of direction, the heavy movement here, and the plyos that go with it, but my brain thinks I can. But I haven't been doing those things anymore, and this is where we see a lot of those. If you're watching, if you guys have been watching the professional collegiate sports right now, and the injury rates have almost doubled in the NFL. I think that Major League Baseball was up 35 to 40% The NBA lost a lot of players this year, and a lot of those injuries were non-contact injuries. Those were things that were happening in open space. Those are problems. Those should not happen. And a lot of times those things are happening because of our movement pattern, which we're going to actually go over that in a little bit. But we want you to understand the difference in training. So yes, in the off season, we're doing a lot of, heavy's the wrong word. I don't want to use the word heavy because not everybody lifts heavy because you don't need to, but there's heavy load of movement pattern. So we're talking about compound movements. That's hip, ankle, and knee all moving together. Shoulder, elbow, wrist, all moving together. And then how the visual system understands those planes of movements and all of those things combined. So when I say that, there's three aspects of the training that we go through. So you have your visual system, how you perceive what's going on. Then you have your spatial awareness, you have your vestibular system. So anybody ever used a leveler at home? Like hang a picture or do anything like that? There's that little liquid in the middle that tells you when you're level. You might have it on app on your phone. You have that in your inner ear. You have liquid in your inner ear that tells you when you're perfectly balanced and when you're not. So right now, just looking out, I can see a few of you doing this and this, and I can see different movements in your shoulder or your head, and that's your center. That's where you're comfortable, and that could be from a sport you played, it could be from your job, it can be from a number of different things, but that's become your center. And so this is where we start going through movement pattern changes because of the way we feel that we're centered. And then you have your proprioceptive system, your limbs. Right? So all three of those systems combined is what makes you athletic, which makes you human to be able to stand upright like this and move around. Now you start adding other bodies into it and a ball and inbounds and out of bounds and making contact with another person and so on and so forth. All of those things get really confusing. As if we haven't trained ourselves to do those things and then continue to train those things, this is where we get in trouble. And so we talk a lot about the lonely work. And this is something that we kind of talk about as pros, that nobody's ever made it to that level with just going to practice. It's just the reality of it. And so there's things that you have to do on your own when no one else is looking, when nothing else is going on, and you have time to sit down, even if it's a 10-minute study break, to go through different movement pattern changes. And that's something that I wanted AJ to speak on because he did a lot of that in his career. If anybody knows anything about professional football, professional sports in general, you have about a 3-year lifespan on average, and I think now it might even be 2.5, but a 3-year lifespan is the average professional career. This guy played for 10, and he's still standing, and still moving, and still coaching. So he did something right. So AJ, if you wouldn't mind going, and just talking about what, the difference between what your off-season training was to your preseason training, to your in-season training, and the things that we talk about a lot that you were doing in the locker room prior to games. People are like, what are you doing?
Yeah, for me, like my preseason was completely different than my in-season work. Right. The preseason for me was, like you said, lots of load, lots of movement prep, and then when we get into season, you lighten the load, but you still have to maintain doing all those things right into the season. For me, it was more because I play defensive back. I got to do everything from a back pedal. I couldn't put a whole bunch of load on, just like I couldn't put a whole bunch of weight on, because once I'm too heavy, then I'm too slow. I got to put pads on and all these things. So, like I was telling him, when I got to the league, I was heavy. I was 205, thought I had to be big, fast, strong, and all these things. And then I got there, and they were like, "You're too heavy. You need to drop weight because you're going to put pads on. We need you fast and agile, playing defensive back." So, got down back to my regular weight, what I felt comfortable at, and I was phenomenal. I was able to get in and out of space. Loading my hips was a big thing, which I always emphasize to the kids that I teach here, is loading each hip and being able to transfer load into both hips, right? When we do balance and reach, or single leg balance and reach, some people here, right, it's easy to do this on one leg, but the moment you go onto the other leg, it doesn't feel natural because, like we said, your center of balance is, most people stand right here, they load into one hip, right? They're just naturally. And then you go over to this one, it doesn't feel the same, right? So what we do here is try to make sure that this hip is equal to this hip. So then when you're transferring weight on both sides, it feels natural. And then when you get into the game full speed, because we're loading it so much when we're here, it just becomes easy to get in and out of space. So for me, preseason is loading up into the offseason, doing those same things, a lot more lighter weight, working on the vestibular system. And like you said, before games, I would always be doing VOR. I would come in.
Which I'll explain in a second.
Yeah, we do ball drills and things like that. And sometimes, before a game, you're in a fog or you don't feel like you're there yet, or just trying to work up to getting into, being hyped for a game. And for me, VOR and activating my vestibular system made it a little bit easier for me to track the ball and do all these things. For me, playing defensive back, you're only going to get so many opportunities to catch the ball, right, as a defensive back. You want to intercept it and catch it. For me, you have to capitalize on those opportunities, so I have to be able to catch the ball if I'm going to get my hands on it. That's where the VOR and the vestibular system and working all those drills comes into play. I'll let Ryan talk about that.
Yeah, so the VOR, what he's talking about is a drill you can do from anywhere. You can do this at home. You can do this while you're sitting down before you get up. Has anybody ever gotten up out of the chair and been a little lightheaded? Or gotten off the treadmill and kind of done one of those things? This is what we're talking about. These are those systems, because your brain will turn off systems that you're not using. So the treadmill is a good example. If I'm running on the treadmill and then I get off and I kind of feel that going on, well, there's a couple things going on. I'm moving, but I'm not moving. So my depth perception is turned off. I don't need it. My brain is conserving energy at that time. My vestibular system hasn't changed because I have a perfect pattern of where I'm running. Just like if I were to go from here to there, to the turf, to outside, all of those different things have different levels and different feels, so my brain is constantly adjusting to that. So the VOR is a drill that you can do, and I'll actually have somebody come up here because I want you to feel it. It's vestibular ocular reflex. That's what those three letters stand for. So you got your vestibular system, you have your ocular system, and then the reflex of those two things working together. So it's as simple as putting your thumb out, or some people don't even like doing that because they feel like they look weird, so that's fine. Pick a spot on the wall, keep your eyes fixed on it, and just move your head up and down through different planes of motion while you're looking at it, side to side, and you can also do diagonal. So my eyes are staying fixed on something, but I'm moving my head through space. So what that does to my body and my brain is give my brain this safe feeling of understanding that I'm not gonna fall. There's no danger here. So how that helps us is the spatial awareness that comes with it, right? Because if I don't set stuff up like that, and then all of a sudden, like Taekwondo, and I start moving around with somebody and I get into a funky position, all of a sudden something might go, or I might have to give up on a move because I feel so awkward, I'm afraid something's gonna happen, so then I get into a really compromising position. But if that's set up properly, then I might be able to take a little step further and rebalance myself and be in a better, stronger position so that I don't get taken down. There's all these kind of little things that the brain goes through that we don't really understand or we don't really realize that are happening. If I could have somebody who wants to be a little, and you're going to be after because I want to show you something with your knee, and actually showing you this little thing that we're going to show on camera will help you too. But I want a volunteer, if you don't mind. I want to do a quick little flexibility test. So if anyone who struggles a little bit with, being able to go down and touch the ground with their hamstrings, do I have any volunteers? I'll put my mask on if I do. Anybody? Any takers? Come on, somebody. You came all this way. You can walk 6 feet up and be a little volunteer. Come on. Do you have hamstring? Are you tight in your hamstring? You're like, Get up, come on. All you gotta do is stand right there. Stand right there. Right there, that's the thing right there is good. Okay, so just standing where you're standing, I want you to go down and stop when you feel tight. As soon as you feel tight, I want you to stop. That's not terrible. Okay, so stand up. What you're gonna do, so what we're gonna do is that whole spatial awareness thing. So how does the skin work? The skin is the biggest organ on the body, right? So here we have this system that the brain uses, so when we start feeling tight, I'm getting into a position where my brain feels a little uncomfortable. So my brain uses this organ to tighten up so that I don't go into a further range of motion, thus making something happen with a joint or a muscle or something else like that. Does that make sense? So what we're going to do is we're going to tell the brain she's fine, everything's okay, and we're going to go through this drill. So put your thumb straight out. Okay. Now stare at your thumb and move your head up and down slowly. But don't take your eyes off of it. It might even make your eyes water. It's not an easy thing to do. Keep going. Breathe. The better you get at it, start dropping your chin. There you go. Good. Go side to side. Keep your eyes fixed. So you guys see that you can see that her eye muscles are moving as she's keeping it fixed on that thumb, and she's moving. So now go diagonal. You're going like this. Yeah, there you go. Good, very good. Stagger. And switch it the other way. And then the last, right after you get done with this, we'll do a couple more. I'm going to have you just go to your toes like this. Keep going up and down. It's harder than it looks. So now move your head up and down as you do that. This is called bouncing BOR. So now we're actually moving through space a little bit, up and down, but she's still having to find her balance. Okay, now shake all that off. Okay, go back in. Boom. Crazy, huh? Okay, so that's the whole thing, is we get told all the time from a flexibility standpoint, the only way that you can get more flexible is you have to spend time stretching all the time. Yes and no. Yes, we need to stretch. Yes, we need to move through ranges of motion. We need to do those things. But there's plastic versus elastic. Those two terms in kinesiology we use a lot. So the difference between the two. Obviously, elastic being, okay, well, let's say we warmed up, and we did all these things, and okay, so 30 minutes into my workout, yeah, I'm going to be pretty flexible. I'm going to move around a lot better. But what happens 2 hours after my workout? Oh, gosh, I'm tight. Oh, my goodness. Next morning, oh, I'm so tight. The plastic thing that we're talking about is actually making change. So the more that your brain feels comfortable and the more sophisticated you get with some of those vision drills like you just did, like adding that bouncing one in, the better you get at that, actually moving through space and maybe doing some high knees or skipping or doing different things like that, the more concrete that comes with the brain and the more flexible my brain allows me to be because it trusts me in space. Does that make sense? And so those are a lot of things, like that's something you can do every single day, multiple times a day, throughout the day. Do it before practice, after practice, in the middle of practice. I mean, those are things that you can do all the time. Same thing with mobility. So from the ankle, the knee, the hip, the spine, which we're going to get into that, all of those things can be done anyway. And that's the point of it. And that's where we talk about the lonely work. Those are things that doesn't have to be done with a coach necessarily. You don't have to be here doing it. You don't have to be at practice. This is stuff that you do on your own because ultimately, again, what you're going to resort back to is what you trained it to do. And so you got to think about from your entire day, if you're awake, let's say if you're awake for 16 to 17 hours a day, and you go to practice for one of those or two of those twice a week, well, just do the math. It's not a lot of time that you're practicing movement. So then, okay, well, I add in private lessons, and then I add in weightlifting or whatever. Okay, well, there's another 4 hours out of your week, so a total of 6 to 8 hours, maybe 10 in some cases, for your entire week. If you're awake 16 hours a day times 5, well, times 7, but you only practice for 10, what else are you doing? That's the question. Those are the movement patterns that you have to start thinking about, that what is going to make a difference in me that keeps me injury resistant. Because again, the higher level you go, the best ability that you can have is availability. And if you're always hurt, you're not available, that's when things start going away. That's why the NFL, MLB, NBA, the average career is about 3 years. Because everybody's so hurt all the time. And so what happens? Well, they have to move on. Same thing in college recruiting. You get hurt. It happened to me. I broke my ankle my senior year of high school. In November of my senior year, playing football, I broke my ankle. All the schools that I was looking at, talking to, getting letters from, visiting, went away. Just went away. I was heartbroken. I worked so hard for it. Luckily, I ended up going somewhere anyway. But the point of it is, there was about a 6-week period where I was devastated, didn't know what to do. I had worked up my entire life up to that point, and then it was gone because I broke my ankle. Because someone fell on it and it broke. Now, the point of all that is getting to an understanding that if we take the time by ourselves to do that lonely work, to get people to understand, like if I had a couple coaches that said, okay, it's just a broken ankle, you're going to be fine. But the problem was the schools I wanted to go to moved on from me. That's just the business of sports. Someone has to be on the field, on the court, on the starting line. Somebody has to be there. And if you're hurt, you're not that person. So what are you doing to help yourself on the time that you don't have a coach around you? And that's really important to understand. So we want to go over this. This is an athlete that has started training here, and they're okay with us showing you this. So this young man who's getting recruited right now to play college football had ACL surgery a year ago. And we're going to show you why it happened. So see if the internet allows us to play it in full speed. Right there. Okay, so he's a defensive back, just like AJ was. So for those of you that don't know from a defensive position what's going on, is there's transition from back to front. So that's what's the first thing that's important to understand. Now, when we go into a planting situation, what happens is this thing is out in space by itself if I don't plant properly, and that's an issue. So, sorry, I'll take this down. So when we start talking about that, it's that compound movement that I mentioned earlier, so ankle, knee, hip, and being able to stay in the right position and do all those things. When I'm sprinting, jumping, landing, changing direction, I'm creating 10 to 12 times my body weight of ground force into my body every step that I take, every jump that I take and land. Think about that. Your body weight, take it, on the low side, multiply your body weight by 10. Now, depending on what sport you do or what event you do, now we're talking about how many steps, how many times am I having to move my feet back and forth in a competition alone? 1,000? 500? So your weight times 10 times 1,000. That's how much ground force you absorbed on that day. It's not practice. That's one competition. For some of you that are playing sports where you have to do multiple competitions in one weekend, think about that. That's a huge amount of force that your body is absorbing. Now, let's talk about position. So as this young man comes back, here's our issue. Right there is where he should be planting and going forward. He can't because of the position of his foot, so he has to double take. See that? Everybody see that movement right there? This is very common. This happens every game that you've ever been able to watch. This is happening. I guarantee it. So we go here, pop. Here's our big issue. Look at his foot. See that? Everybody see that? Where his foot's rotated to the outside? Okay, so let's talk about that for just a second. Let me rewind it to it. Okay, so we talked about joint mobility. So when we start talking about joint mobility, there's an entire train that goes up the body. My ankle, right there, I have 3 major parts of my ankle joint-wise, and we have nerves that travel through all 3 of those. The nerve that travels right through there goes right back here. So when you start talking about deceleration, this is a major contributor back here, your posterior chain, to decelerating your weight. Think about doing a deadlift or a squat as an example. So if I'm rotating to the outside wall of my foot, I'm crushing that nerve by compounding that joint, which deafens the signal from that nerve up here. So now this and this aren't turning on at full capacity. So where's the next place that all that energy has to go? The next major joint above my foot. That's a problem. That's where injuries occur, right there. So, as an example, to be able to have the flexibility of the ankle, just doing a simple ankle tilt like this daily, more than once a day. We probably do it as coaches 5 or 6 times a day as we're doing classes. Right? So I'm doing that. We're going inside as well. So I'm working on the mobility of my ankle. So now think about somebody coming and stepping on your ankle or landing awkwardly. If I have trained myself to have that flexibility, I'm going to recover a lot quicker when that happens, when that force happens, because I've trained myself to be on top. Right? Secondly, I want to think about the balance of my foot. So I want to be on the middle to the inside wall of my foot, just like your hand. If you had a 50-pound bag to pick up, would you pick it up with your pinky? Or would you pick it up with your index and your thumb? Well, here, right? So we have big toes and little toes. When I walk, I push off that big toe. When I change direction, I'm pushing off that big toe. The issue is we end up rolling to the outside like this, and that's where we get endangered because the pressure can't go there. So then we rotate like this, but at the same time, look what happens to my knee when I do that. So now I'm doing that at full speed, and now all those joints and those tendons they're going in places they shouldn't go. So now that core, here, 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 are not turning on. I have an issue. So let's look at the residual of what happens to this young man as we go through that. So that happens. Now watch what happens here. I'm going to rewind just a sec. Watch here. Now he doesn't get to move much, right? So he has to heel kick just to get into position. And then look at his body position right there. Everybody see? Here, straight, like we're in a really bad position because all the pressure, as you can see, is right there. And you can see that his glutes are not doing anything right now. Now watch what happens because of that position of his back foot. This happens because of this. Watch what happens next step. Oops, I'm moving on. There we go. Now watch this. This is where we have some serious trouble because his toe is pointed at me, but he's going towards you guys. That's really, really, really bad here. So how do we fix that? So in about a 15-minute span, we did the ankle mobility stuff. We did something I'm going to show you here in a second for your knee injury. And then we did a lot of movement pattern recognition of being on the inside to the middle of the inside wall of the foot. And when you make change of direction, when I go in, if you were to go in and like hit somebody, kick somebody, drive into somebody, I want to make sure that my foot, my knee, and my hip are in line. We can't have any of that stuff. That's not going to end up very good, right? It's even like striking a soccer ball. It's the same idea. If I have a ball in front of me here and I come up and I do this, I might be the best in the world. I'm going to be accurate most of the time because of how talented I am, but there's going to be times where I miss. So anybody's ever watched a PK and you're watching a professional sports, a professional soccer league, and they miss a PK, like completely miss the frame. How is that possible? Those people have taken millions and millions and millions of kicks, and they miss bad on the frame, off, right? That's position. They got a little too charged up, the position was off, and they made bad contact on the ball. It's the same thing. It's the same exact thing, same principle and everything. So going through movement pattern recognition, opening up the ankles and doing some joint mobility through his spine and through his lower leg, this was the result. I'll go through so you can see it. Uh-oh. There we go.
Squeeze.
Oh, sorry, am I in the way? So as you go back, now watch this. No stutter step. Look how his abs are now engaged, right? So he's able to drive his knee up, not heel kick. Remember the other one where he heel kicked? He started to roll just a hair, but again, when we start talking about shoes, very important factor, he's wearing some pretty thick Nike, so the foam at some point will break down. And now my feet are forced this way because the foam is broken down. Now, I would not recommend, nice shoes, by the way, we're wearing the same shoes. So, I would not recommend everybody go to a shoe like this right away because it takes a lot of foot fitness to do this, but look at these shoes. There's nothing to them. So for me, I'm always walking around barefoot. Now, someone like you who competes barefoot might want to move to something like this at some point, right? Because you've got to have strong feet, especially with everything you're doing that changes direction, so on and so forth. So, as he goes through space there, he now gets to get that knee drive. Oh, it's not moving on me again. There we go. Knee drive. Oops, sorry. And now watch for that front foot. See, now he can push off that back leg. So you see where he's now getting, when we talk about that compound movement, extension from the ankle to the knee to the hip. If that's happening, I know my glutes are on. I'm pushing from my glutes. And it allows me to drive in the direction that I'm trying to go, right there. So see how everything's forward now. Now watch this foot. Remember how bad it was on that last one? And now he's able to push off and bring that foot forward too. And that took about 15 minutes to get him to understand that. And so those are really important factors to understand that he could have been doing this on his own all the time, like he was talking about in the locker room before a game. These are movement patterns that can be practiced all the time so that we can create these types of movements to keep everything in line, get the right muscles engaged so that we are preventing injury. That's a really important factor to understand of how we're doing these things. So we have someone who's competes in Taekwondo. Is that all you do, is just Taekwondo? Yeah. So we have a little bit of a knee issue going on. And do you feel it squatting, or when do you feel it most? Does it bother you all the time?
Mainly squatting and walking.
Okay. So can you give me, do you mind being a demonstrator?
Yeah.
Okay, let's do it. So all I'm going to have you do is just start about right here and walk to that blue line for me, right on the track. And it's your right knee, correct? Huh? Yes?
Yes.
Okay, good. Turn around, come back at me. And when do you feel the pain? When you make contact or when you pick it up?
Contact mainly.
Okay, and then if you can just go into a squat, but don't go into pain. I just want to see what happens when you squat to see where it starts hurting. So where does it hurt? Point to the point. Right? Okay. Yeah. Okay, so stand up. So there's a couple things going on. So what I see right now is when you're squatting, you actually have pretty good range of motion in your ankles. So you're moving here, so you have a good flexibility there, but you're not sitting here. So if you were to go drive on somebody or shoot on somebody in your sport, these aren't causing it. You're doing something else, which can take more time. And if you take more time, what's going to happen? You can't, or a block, or they move, or whatever, and now you're in a vulnerable position, right? So there's a couple different things that you can do from a joint mobility standpoint, but there's also a thing called RPR that we do here. It's called Reflexive Performance Reset. So there's, and that'll be up to you guys if you want me to do that. It's a little release. So we have myofascial release, essentially what it is, and you have a lymphatic system. Normally we think about the lymphatic system as like little lymph nodes up here, but we have that through our entire body. And so we have lymphatic releases all throughout the system. And there's certain spots that will tighten up, which causes the skin to move in a different direction, which then again causes tightness in certain areas. So one thing I want to do first is keep facing the way you're facing. Do you mind if I do? Okay, so I want you to stand close enough to squeeze my fist with your heels. Okay, standing the way you're standing, I want you to try to squeeze my fist. It's kind of hard to do, right?
Yeah.
Okay, so don't move. Stay exactly where you are. So there's a couple things going on. So from our pelvis, what we want to understand is we want to be able to connect between the two, and especially someone who does Taekwondo, this is really, really important. So our lower abs is what connects our pelvis and puts us into a really grounded position. So a lot of times what we do is we'll curve this lower part of our back, our lumbar spine, which is hyperextending the lumbar spine. If I do that, then I've created a longer lever here that takes longer to come through. So I have my psoas muscle, I have my hip flexor, I have a couple different things going on in there, and if this gets too long, then other issues start happening. And I don't know how to use those guys because all this other stuff's happening. So what I want you to do is think about taking your belt line and pulling it to your belly button. Close. So here. Yeah, there, yeah. Do you feel the difference? You feel your lower abs now?
Yeah.
Okay, let them go. Do it again. Very good. Now, while doing that, what I want you to also feel is right now this toe is pointed out that way just a little bit, so I want you to get it straight, but I want the weight of your feet to be from here to here. So think about being in the middle of your feet and the majority of your weight being more in there. You feel that? Okay. Now do that, set your abs. Okay, you good? You feel your abs?
Yeah.
Okay, squeeze now. Yeah. Feel your butt?
Yeah.
And do you feel your adductors, which are those muscles?
Yeah, a little bit.
Okay, so now what I want you to do is turn around. Come over here real quick for me. Sorry. Face that way. So when you walk this time, I want you to focus on your abs, the position you were just in, and trying to make sure the middle to the inside wall of your feet touch the ground and not allow the roll to happen. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Okay, try it. Abs. Oh. Good. How's that walk feel?
Better?
Does it feel any different?
Yeah.
Okay, so come here real quick. Come again. Abs. So we're going to do the same thing in the squat. So what I want you to do, so I'll demonstrate it for you. So I want you to get your feet set, same position though, inside wall of your feet. Okay? Set your abs and just go into that squat, but I want you to pretend that you're going to sit back into something, and it's okay to allow your spine to come forward just a little bit. So we don't have to be upright. Sit back into your hips a little bit. Keep your lower abs engaged and squeeze right here. Yeah, it's okay. You'll find it. There you go. How's that feel? Is that any less pain?
Yeah, let's play.
Okay, so stand up. Can you pop your shoes off for me? So now we're going to go into the mobility stuff. So we just kind of repatterned what I want her feeling, right, when she walks and squats. So now we're going to actually focus on the ankles real quick. So put your foot straight out in front of you. Internally rotate it and open it up just like this. You have to do that 8 times. You feel the stretch right there?
Yeah.
So that's that nerve I was talking about earlier that actually goes back here. Good, switch. Ooh. Good. Now we're going to go inside. Again, all things you can do any time of the day from anywhere. Good. And switch. Okay, we're going to do 2 more actually. So you're going to put your foot straight behind you like this, put your toenails on the track. And then you're going to lightly, like quarter squat, come down. And I want you to feel a stretch right here. Do it again. Feel that stretch right there?
Yeah.
You don't even have to go that far. There you go, right there. You feel the stretch?
Yeah.
Good, keep going. 3, give me 2 more. 4, and 5. Now with the same foot, I want you to just drop your heel out here to my hand. Yep, and do the exact same thing. You feel that?
Yes.
Okay, good. 3, 2 more. 4, and 5. How's your knee feel doing that?
Feels okay.
Yeah? Okay, switch feet, do the same thing. No pain though?
No pain.
Okay, good. Go. That's good. That's all you need. 2, 3, 4, and 5. And go out. Go. 2, 3, 4, 5. Okay, walk for me. Just walk to that white line back. Abs inside wall of your foot. How's your knee feel?
Feels better.
Yeah? Keep going, come back. Okay, now we're going to do the VOR that we did earlier. So put your thumb straight out in front of you. Go up and down and keep your eyes fixed on your thumb. That's 1. Give me 5. 2, 3, 4, and 5. Okay, shake that off. Go back into your squat position and go slow, but I want you to squat. Set your abs inside wall of your foot and squat. How's that feel?
Feels better.
Yeah, it's a pain. You guys noticed how, I don't know if you saw this just the coach in me, there was a lot more, you can stand up, sorry. You're like, oh my God, I don't know how to do this. There was a lot more confidence that time when she went down. I don't know if you guys saw that or not. So now sit on your behind for me real quick. I'm going to do that release, if that's okay. Yeah. Okay, so just leg out. So for that release, and again, this is stuff you can do to yourself. I recommend to all my athletes that you should be massaging your own feet every single night. You should be doing your own feet because there's spots right in here in the arch, like that. That probably see your face. I just lit her up, right? There's a spot right back here on the calf, and then there's a spot on her quad that I'm about to do right now. And all of these spots, if you don't pay attention to them, will tighten up. And if I have a tight spot on my foot, will that affect the way I move? Of course it will, right? I have 200,000 nerve endings on the bottom of my foot. If I have a tightness area on any part of that foot, is that going to affect the way my foot articulates? Of course it will. If it changes the way this thing articulates, will it change the way this thing articulates? And that thing articulates? And that thing articulates? Absolutely 100%. So if we're not taking care of that stuff ourselves, we're going to have issues. So right here, you go to this muscle right here. This little round part here. And you work up about work up 2 or 3 inches right there. We have someone who does Taekwondo, so we know she's tough. When she raises an eyebrow, that means we found something, right? And feel that like right in there. There's a little ball right there. Sorry, don't punch me or kick me. Okay, stand up. You know. Okay, take it off. Okay, squat again for me. Widen your feet just in here. There you go. And then sit back into your hip a little bit more and squeeze right there. How's that feel? Stand up. Let's find that again. Oh, geez. How'd that feel? Feel okay?
That was good.
Was there no pain right there?
That was good.
Wow, that was awesome. Did you guys see how fast she did?
Yeah.
Stand up, stand up. That was really good. Okay, walk and see if you can hold on to that. By yourself, just walk without any cues and see if you can keep doing it with no pain. How's that?
Feels better.
Yeah? Now see, those are all things that you could be doing on your own all the time, and you're repatterning how all that stuff is being communicated from your foot all the way to your head. We didn't even work on your actual foot or your calf. We just went to very specific spots. But those are things that you could be doing on your own all the time, and then that movement pattern changes. So what you just did right there with speed, that you just completely changed your entire perception of what your spatial awareness was. I don't know if you could, that's too complicated of a way to say it, but that's exactly what happened. You went from doing this to boom and going right there. Now think about what you do. I mean, getting into those positions is really important, and the faster you do them, the quicker you can react. That's important. Okay, thank you. So, going into those things, again, that stuff that she just did, yes, the first time it took you, I had to show you what to do, but now you can totally do that on your own all the time, right? That's the lonely work. Those are the things that we're talking about that you should be doing all the time. That's how you stay healthy. That's how you start moving better, because of that, and the speed that she just got into that squat position, she's going to react faster now. So now when she's doing the sport that she does in Taekwondo, if I have somebody coming into a move on me and I'm able to move out of the way or counter at the exact same time, I just completely changed the competition because I was quick to react. And I was quick to react because my spatial awareness was heightened. And that's something I can be doing on my own all the time. Those are the things that we really want to communicate here. You want to add anything to that? Sorry, I know I'm hogging the stage here.
No, I mean, I like your VR. My favorite one is the eye push-up.
Oh, yeah.
That's my favorite one. That's the one I probably do more than anything.
So he's talking about depth perception. And when he was talking about catching a ball, this is one of the biggest things that we talk about. And again, you could even do it like when he's talking about it, when he says eye push-up. You have one out as far as you can go, one closer, and if you watch my eyes, I'm looking here, and then I look here. You can see the difference in my eyes. Can you see my eyes move when I do that? So it's convergence and divergence. Now let's say I want to add a wrinkle to that. I'm going to look at that light over there, or the speed bag. So now I've got three things. I got the speed bag, this finger, that finger, speed bag, this finger, close finger, middle finger, right? And I'm using depth perception every time I do that so that my eyes are converging in, converging out, converging in, converging out. So for those of you that play ball sports, that's a really important thing to understand. I mean, the Major League Baseball is probably one of the better ones to really understand. You got someone who's making millions of dollars play shortstop, and you see them sitting there, and the ball kind of comes up to them like that. That surprised them. That's because their eyes didn't converge fast enough when the ball came off the bat. That's trainable. Some people have a natural ability to do that, just like some people naturally jump really high. Can you learn to jump higher? Of course. Can you learn to run faster? Of course. Can you train your visual system to track a ball faster? Yes. 100%. It's muscle. And it's just learning what that is and how to do it. And that's a really important thing to understand. So from depth perception to the VOR, then there's a saccadic eye movement. That's where you're finding two targets, keeping your chin neutral, and bouncing your eyes back and forth, so you're not creating blind spots. Because if I'm coming up court, let's say I'm playing basketball now, and I'm coming up court, and I see something happen over here, and I go your way, and then all of a sudden, that closes on me, I have to go back this way, and boom, there they are. Well, I'm in trouble now. But if I would have been coming down court and just use my eyes, I can still see everybody over here. So if that closes on me, I know I can step back, find it, and then go back this way and open up a movement, some kind of route for myself because I didn't create a blind spot. Or when you're driving, same thing. If I'm driving and something happens over here and I do this, I can't see. That's a dangerous position to be in. Right? Same idea. So these are all things that are trainable. And this is where, again, we talk about that lonely work of stuff that you should be doing on your own time. And it just makes you better, not just for your sport, but it helps you move and react better to things that just happen in everyday life. How many of us have tripped on a sidewalk or a curb or anything? All of us. Those are things from a spatial awareness standpoint to be the difference between breaking my leg and just kind of tripping and keep going. That's the difference. That small little difference of training those systems to react faster and better. Another one important thing before we kind of go through any more is the spine. It's a really important thing that we don't ever focus on from a mobility standpoint, because we think, oh, it's the spine. Yeah, my ankles need to be fluid, and so do my knees and my hips and my elbows and wrists, but our spine, we don't ever really talk about that part. So you got your lumbar spine, which we were just talking about lengthening, right, down here. And then you have your thoracic spine, which is the biggest part of your spine, about here to here, which is one, as humans, where we hold all of our stress, number one. Then we start talking about communication. Okay, we just talked about we have 200,000 nerve endings on the bottom of each foot, right? But it has to travel all the way up here. Now, one of the things that happens is it has to travel through a path, my spine. If my spine is super tight and compacted, what do you think is happening to those nerve signals by the time it gets all the way up there? It's a little quieter, right? I'm not getting the same communication that I had before. And when my foot hits the ground, my nervous system, my understanding of what's happening to my foot right now travels at 268 miles an hour. Think about that. I'm only 6 feet tall. So from there to here, 268 miles an hour, it's going bing, 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 which allows me to move and not fall, right? Okay, so if I have tightness all back here, that's going to change this movement, doing anything, changing direction. It's really important to create the synovial fluid, if anybody's ever heard that term before. That's the fluid that we have in our joints that allow movement instead of being bone on bone. Right, we have synovial fluid in our joints that allows us to move. We have the same thing in our spines. So a lot of times when we have the pain back here or lack of flexibility, pain up here in the cervical spine, a lot of times that is happening because of this part of your spine right here. That's a lot of times the root cause, and not just your lumbar spine. So I've had athletes that have had, problems in their spine where their lumbar is like moving out like this. Well, when you start getting super tight up here and you start doing this and your posture changes, well, everything has to go somewhere. And so if I'm not constantly working on the mobility of my spine and the lengthening of my spine, when I'm running and changing direction and landing and all of these things, I'm going to have problems. So one little drill you can do for your spine, and I recommend this not just for athletes, and for humans in general, you will feel so much better. So you can do this from a chair. Actually, I'll do it from a box first. Because most of us are going to be sitting somewhere down on the ground. So, like for those of you that work in an office, just sitting on your chair and putting your foot out like that, and then just take your hands, interlock them, put them right below your knee. Sit up nice and tall, right here. Now breathe in, and then when you breathe out, think about pushing your chest away from your knee like someone's trying to poke you. Don't let them. My arms are straight. Here, lengthen the spine. Breathe in, come up nice and tall. Do it again. Just like that, open up the scapulas, open up the spine, and then stand up and feel the difference. Try it if you're just sitting there. Open it up, breathe it out, come up nice and tall. You do it on both sides. Now, if you want to be a little bit more aggressive with it, this is where you start adding bands. You can add bands to that, where you put a band around your foot, put a band around your back, and do the exact same thing on this foot, and put it around my back. So now I have resistance to it. Now, someone like myself or AJ, Alex down there, people have been doing this a lot. So you got to think about Isaac, who does it quite often. What you got to start thinking about is, and Aiden, how often I do these things is sometimes I'll have to be a little bit more aggressive with the movement because I need more feedback. Just doing this for me, it feels good, but I'm not going to get a whole lot out of it for me because I've been doing it for 8 years. So for me, yes, it feels great, but if I want, like if my lower back was sore, I would use a band because I need more feedback. I need a little bit stronger of a movement to because I'm used to doing this kind of stuff, right? So it's understanding the different positions of the spine and how to mobilize those. Going through the neck and constantly moving the neck, cervical spine, thoracic spine, lumbar spine. Because ultimately, if we don't have those things mobile and moving around, it's not going to matter a whole lot what's going on down here anyway. So, do you want to add anything?
Yeah, just real quick. You were talking about all the nerve endings on the bottom of the foot. The easiest way to release that for me would be just to grab a golf ball, a lacrosse ball, or anything, and just roll the foot out. I do it before anything, any type of drills that I'm going to do, or I'm going to be planting my feet, football drills, anything like that. For you, like you're doing taekwondo and you're placing your feet down, like I would say, just grab a ball, roll the foot out before, and just feel the difference between that before planting and planting on both legs, and then rolling the feet out, and then actually you'll be able to feel the ground a lot more. It opens the foot up and everything else.
That's a great point, absolutely. And this is something that, right before practice, in the middle, in between competitions, when you wake up in the morning, a lot of times they say your body is not ready for stretching yet, and it's not so much the body, it's the spine. It's not quite ready because we've been essentially immobile for however many hours you were asleep. So going straight into some type of movement or stretching could be a little bit of a shock to the system. But using that idea where maybe you start with a tennis ball because it's not as aggressive, and you're just rolling your feet out with the tennis ball, then get up and start moving around. Then move on to the ankles, right? You're making breakfast, whatever, to your ankles while you're pouring or making eggs or whatever you're doing, right? You're moving around a little bit, then maybe I'll go over to the counter and just do a little bit with my spine and just slowly start moving into those positions. You'll notice by the time you leave the house, you're 20 times more awake than you were yesterday. Because I'm using less energy to move around now because I've just opened up all these systems. So remember, you only have so much energy to use on your daily routine. And if I'm tight here, and I'm tight here, and I'm tight here, that all takes mental capacity to pay attention to. And because I'm paying attention to those things, my movement pattern changes. That takes energy too. So the more time that I spend, the couple seconds it took me to do this, roll out my foot, move my spine around a little bit, all those things start opening up. I'm not spending energy on those things anymore. Now my body can just move through space and I feel better. I'm more alert now. And that's important going into practice, going into competition. And again, these are, not to beat a dead horse here, but it's the lonely work that you should be doing on your own all the time. Anything else? Oh, sorry for keeping you late here. Do you have any questions or thoughts or? Go ahead.
On the sets, when you tell them like the tilts, you do.
Yeah, so I
side.
typically recommend 2 to 3. Everybody's different. If you're getting a result and it feels good after 5 or 6 reps, you're good. Some might do 8. 2 sets, maybe 3 at the most. I say normally 2 is probably good. If you're waking up in the morning or you're going to practice or whatever. But a lot of times when we're talking about in the middle of a competition and we have a timeout, we have some downtime, just do it 5 times. Just open it back up. Remember, all you're doing is reminding this thing what the purpose is. Just remind it. Oh, yeah, oh. Okay, good. Yeah, everything's back on. Go. Right? And so just as an example, those are things that we do every day. Like our warm-up, for those of you that have worked out here, that's every single day. Now you're oh, that's why we do that stuff. Is that what you were thinking I did? Yeah. Because you do it every day, and you're like, why the heck am I doing all this junk? It takes, 8 minutes? But the whole point is, now you're primed and ready to move. That's the point. Is that your body is turned on, and it's ready to go now. Instead of us just sitting here. Because is static stretching good? Yes, it is. But prior to doing something dynamic, I'm not moving any joints here. I'm just stretching out. And ultimately what's happening up here is after I hold this for 12 seconds, I'm essentially telling the brain it's time to go to sleep. We're stretched out, we're relaxed, everything's good, you're safe, chill out. And then I go from that to a box jump. It's not good enough. That's important to understand too. Stretching is great, but there's more to it than just holding a stretch. And you have to understand the why. Your joints will only move as well as the muscles they're connected to. Your muscles will only work as well as the joints they're connected to. So if we're not focused on both, we're going to have issues at some point. The difference is a lot of you that are young and able to get knocked over 15 times in the game and get back up and go, you think, oh, everything's fine. It's not always going to be fine. It takes that one time that you were a little off and bang, you're down. And those are the things we're trying to alleviate so that it doesn't happen to you in open space. Are things going to happen in freak nature things when you make contact with another human being, like what happened to me? Absolutely, it's happened to him multiple times. But what we're trying to save you from is yourself, from open space injuries that happen all too often. Hamstrings, backs, ankles, knees, shoulders, elbows, wrists, all of those things that just shouldn't be happening because we didn't truly understand how to move through space really, really well. And those are things you could be practicing on your own at home. So yeah. Any questions? Thoughts? No?
I think just to leave you guys with this last thought is just piggybacking off what he said, just train the brain first, right? Because if we wake the brain up and wake all the nerve endings up, then the whole body wakes up, right? We can stretch and do everything that we can to get loose, but if the brain isn't working and the nerves aren't firing, then we're only stretching, like you said, just to go to sleep. We got to wake the brain up first, got to wake the nerve endings up, and they'll activate everything else.
And what we do too is, not only are we doing this constantly, and you can ask the athletes that actually train here, we do this all the time, but if you're we've actually started an app. So like football season starts, let's say, and I was like, hey man, I can't be here every day like I am now. There's an app, and that lonely work would be there. Your in-season stuff to, I need to do something 15 minutes a day, even if it's during a study break. You've got to move. You've got to keep those movement patterns happening. You've got to keep those neural pathways open in the joints and all of those things. So even if you can't be working out as much as you would like, you still have to do stuff on your own. And that's why we've created that on the back end so that all you got to do is go, okay, cool, got it. And those are important things that we didn't have. We didn't have that stuff. We're trying to pay it forward. We have all this information now that we've gained over all these years now, and we have a whole staff of people that have kinesiology degrees that were also college athletes and a couple that were pro as well. And that's the point, that we're taking this because we're here and we have our educations because of this. And we're trying to just pay it forward and give people that same information so, maybe it can happen for you too. And if it doesn't, that's fine. But you're going to feel better. As a human being, you will feel better. And that's the whole point. Yeah? I'll stop talking now, sorry. If there's no questions, you guys can go or stay around, work out, whatever you want to do.
Work out there.
Thank you.
Yeah, thanks for coming.